Well, my name is Dan Rayfield, Oregon's Attorney General, and we're here in Ashland today to continue our federal accountability oversight forums that we're having across the state of Oregon.
Nice. And I'll ask you a really basic question to start, which is just tell me what the Attorney General of Oregon does. What is that role?
So the way I think about it is, if you're thinking about just an attorney in general house, you might hire one in your personal life. Kind of think about that for the state of Oregon, right? So we're going to provide advice to agencies. We're going to sit there and provide counsel if we have to enter into contracts, go through that. So really kind of the nuts and bolts of running a business or an agency. But then the other thing I want you to think about is the Attorney General is the attorney for all Oregonians. So we're thinking about defending Oregon's values. We're thinking about protecting consumers, working families. We'll get engaged in that space, whether it is keeping communities safe in a criminal justice sense, or whether it's like going after Monsanto if they're polluting our communities, or right now one of the big things we have is the overreach of the executive branch and really trying to maintain and hold the line there.
Nice. Yes, you're basically like Oregon's lawyer. Tell me more about the overreach and what you've been taking on coming from the federal branch.
Yeah, so in this new Trump administration, what you're seeing is kind of a reworking of how they believe the executive branch should approach the world. And they've been grabbing power in ways that are unconstitutional. A lot of the decisions, like a lot of the funding decisions that are being made in rooms with closed doors without public input. As a result, we're seeing impacts across this country in ways that didn't have the ability for people to come in and say, let's slow down and do it appropriately and allow Congress to hold the hearings and reduce spending. So when we have a president that is violating the Constitution or violating the laws, Oregon and other states will join a lawsuit to prevent them from continuing down an unconstitutional path.
And I understand there's kind of a large number of lawsuits, but do you want to highlight any particular lawsuits that you have going on against the federal government right now?
Yeah, what I would do is classify them for folks in different kind of chunks. So some of them are just essential rights that we have as citizens of the United States. Think about birthright citizenship. It's very common. Presidents for more than 100 years have been following our Constitution that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, right? We have a Trump administration that wanted to change that. And so that's kind of in this broad category of kind of rights that we all have. There's this other category of cases that I would say that Congress has passed laws to spend money in certain things with expectations that services are going to be provided to Americans. So whether that's the Department of Education, whether that's food assistance, whether that's research that's being done at Oregon Health Sciences University. So there's a subset of what I call funding lawsuits that we're engaged in where the federal government or the Trump administration is basically countermanding bills that Congress has passed. So that's another subset. And you have other things that I think we're experiencing as people just in our daily lives about cost of living issues. So think about the tariffs that are going on right now. The president has abused an emergency power that no other president has used to implement tariffs. And tariffs are not something that like foreign businesses pay. They're paid by us because they're passed down because there isn't that margin of profit. And so for us, when people are struggling with the day-to-day expenses, we're stepping in, pushing back against these unconstitutional tariffs and saying, you got to do them the way that Congress intended you to do them.
And then what have we seen here in Oregon in terms of federal impacts on us? What have Oregonians especially noticed? Maybe it's things you've heard at these town halls you're doing, but in what ways is this especially impactful to Oregon?
So a couple of things. First off, think about just broad employment here within the state and all the different ways that impacts us. So one small thing, we were out in Newport in one of our forums. You hear about the fisheries and NOAA and the cuts that are going on the coast. That impacts our business. That impacts our fisheries and the safety of people on our oceans. Incredibly important. We think about all of the research being done at Oregon Health Sciences University. I mentioned that a little bit before. We're talking over $200 million of funding that would go in there. You think about food assistance, contracts being canceled, farmers that have put crops in the ground in reliance upon the money, having those things being cut. We're having veterans benefits, certain services for veterans that are being cut. So a broad range of things. Now, think about that. All these lawsuits that Oregon involved in, we are protecting more than $3.3 billion of funding that otherwise would have come into this state, right? And you know what? You get a lot of power when you're a president or when you come into office. However, you still got to follow the laws that Congress passes. And if you want to make the cuts, that's fine. Do it with public input, but you do it through Congress the way it was intended to be done.
And then last thing, have you had any success in these lawsuits you filed so far? I know it's still early days, but where have your wins been so far?
Yeah, great question. We have more than 35 lawsuits filed right now. And of those, we seek this thing called a preliminary injunction. So while the courts are trying to decide the merits of the case, we say you need to pause the federal government's actions. The burden to be able to do that, you have to show a likelihood of prevailing on the merits, and you have to show irreparable harm. So really high standards to prove. We've received 18 preliminary injunctions. There's 8 preliminary injunctions pending, and we've won on the merits in 2 cases. Actually, one of the cases that Oregon is leading on, the tariffs case, we were one of the 2 that was won on the merits by 3 judges, 2 that were appointed by a Republican, 1 by a Democrat, and we just had the oral arguments on the appellate case last week in Washington, D.C.
Fantastic. Okay, anything else you want to share before we're done?
No, it's always fun to be down here. This is an amazing community. So I'm from Corvallis. This is kind of second best, in my opinion, to Corvallis. No offense. I love being down here. So
we all have our favorites. Ashland's my favorite, or maybe Brookings, or Corvallis.
But you're really not
yours.
from here. You're from Portland. I did my research on you by asking you questions.
Yeah, but just now. Yeah. No, I know. I felt a calling to be down here, so it's a good place to be. Dan, really good to meet you.
Thank you. On the first day that Trump was in office, we really started seeing a flurry of executive orders. And we had to start acting in the moment, as a lot of these decisions, and I think this is why we're here today, these decisions were being made in the dark, in a room, with closed doors, without public input. And the reality of that is that's not the way a democracy is supposed to work. A lot of these decisions, whether you're passing them in a state legislature or in Congress, right, they're designed to have public input, especially when they're going to be impacting all of us. And that is what these forums were designed to do, is to get out in community. And attorneys general have been hosting these forums across the country to hear from communities about these impacts so that we, as attorneys general, can better represent you. Here in Oregon, what we wanted to do was add in a legislative component to this, because it is a partnership to serve communities across this state. There's a role that we play in the Attorney General's office to be able to protect, defend the rule of law, and hold the Trump administration accountable. But there is a reality to some of the things that are going on. There's a lot of power in elections. There's a lot of power in the bills that have been recently passed and how those are going to impact all of us. And some of that requires partnership at the state legislative level, which is why we have the amazing Representative Marsh here, who I served with in the House. She's amazing, by the way. Even more amazing. Even more amazing than this guy right here, Senator Golden. We're growing. I think you've got some fans. One. Yeah, there's one right here. But truly, this is partnership together. So tonight, the focus of this is to hear from you about how these impacts of what's going on in the federal government are impacting all of you, so that way we can better represent you in our respective roles. So thank you for taking time out of your evening to be here tonight. And I will pass it off to Representative Marsh.
Thank you, Attorney General. So great to have you here. I just want to express my thanks first to all of you for showing up. My office has been working with the AG's office on some of the logistics and the outreach on this event tonight. And we continue to tell them, expect a big crowd. This is Southern Oregon, and you turned out. We set up 300 chairs. They're all full. And we have people and those chairs are all full because we are a community that is following these issues carefully. We are worried about them. We are experiencing them in many cases. And tonight is the opportunity to really tell your stories, to share with the Attorney General your observations, your experiences. And I want to thank the Attorney General for coming down to community. It is a long way from Salem. Jeff and I know, because we do that commute on a regular basis. And to come out and be with community and sit and listen to people, I think is something you would not see from every Attorney General. And finally, I want to just briefly say, the fact that you see members of the legislature and the Attorney General sitting up here is really reflective of the collaborative relationship that we have. Many of the things that are going on at the federal government, for example, executive orders, are not issues that we in the legislature have any particular ability to touch. Those are issues that are the subject of 35, is that right? 35 lawsuits that have already been filed by the Attorney General. In other cases, there are policy or funding cuts that are better addressed by the legislature. We're doing our best to play defense in the Oregon legislature, and we will do our best to try to address many of the funding cuts and the policy revisions that we are seeing coming down, although to be very clear, there is no way the state can make up for the tremendous gaps that could be presented to us as a result of federal action. So thank you for being here. Thank you, AG, Attorney General Rayfield, and let's get on with it.
And now, Senator Golden.
Thank you. Well, let's get on to it. Let me just say a couple things that have sort of been said before. I think it's hard to overstate how historic this moment is. We've never been here before. We've never had a president before who thinks of the Constitution as a list of optional suggestions. And it's difficult to react as a state legislator. We hear from a lot of you about the most painful and dangerous developments going on right now. And sometimes, to be very frank, it feels a little bit futile from where we sit. As Pam said, we are trying to strategize on how we can be helpful with resources in the most painful and difficult cutbacks. And our response is going to be very partial there. We make a lot of floor speeches. We send a lot of sign-on letters and resolutions to Washington, to our federal delegation, and to the White House as well. But it doesn't feel like we are really central players in the current situation. The gentleman to my right is. You heard an opening remark that he's our last line of defense against the depredations of the federal government. He's actually our first, middle, and last line of defense. And the job he has stepped up for is probably one he didn't quite envision. There is probably not a more effective counterforce to the illegalities and unconstitutional action of this administration than the collection of state attorney generals who are sworn and actually serious about defending the Constitution. And A.G. Rayfield is right at the tip of the spear of that. I really appreciate how thoughtful he is about a lot of lawsuits have been proposed, and he and his team really examined the merits of them. Haven't signed on to all of them. I think it would be a mistake to do it indiscriminately. I don't think he'd be, and Oregon would be taken as seriously if he did. So he's very rigorous. He's very committed. I doubt this is the job he signed up for, but he couldn't be in a more critical place in terms of sustaining the quality of life and the constitutional rights we all enjoy. So it's a total honor to be included in the event, and I'm really eager to hear what many of you have to say tonight.
Thank you all. So with that,
my name is Sage Tabiste. I am the Creative Arts Program Coordinator here at SOU. I also serve as the President of SEIU 503, Sublocal 84 here at the university. I'm here today not just as a union leader, but as a resident of Southern Oregon who has witnessed firsthand the fragility of our region's economic and educational infrastructure. Recent federal changes, whether it's the threatened dismantling of the Department of Education, deep cuts to Pell Grants, TRIO, or work study, or restrictions on collective bargaining, are not abstract policy shifts. They are direct threats to working families, students, and the fabric of public higher education in Oregon. At SOU, nearly every staff member represented by SEIU is already stretched thin. We are the custodians, electricians, IT staff, administrative coordinators, the people who make the university function behind the scenes. When federal support for education is slashed, it's our students who lose opportunity and our staff who lose jobs. In Southern Oregon, where resources are more limited and recovery for economic shocks takes longer, the impact of these cuts is especially acute. Cuts don't just ripple, they crash. If federal rollbacks continue unchecked, we will see an erosion not only of access to education, but also of family wage jobs, which are already scarce in rural regions like ours. These aren't just positions, they're lifelines for families, drivers of local business, and anchors of community stability. We need your office to stand against federal overreach that targets our unions, our students, and our future. Protecting public education and labor rights in Oregon isn't just a legal obligation, it's a moral one. Thank you for your time and your commitment to justice for all Oregonians.
Thanks, Sid.
Good evening. I'm Kina Moser, Education Manager of Planned Parenthood of Southwestern Oregon. Thank you, Attorney General Rayfield, for this town hall and for fighting to protect Oregon values like access to essential health care and education. In Oregon, Planned Parenthood provides everything from A to V, abortion to vasectomy, with over 80,000 patient visits a year, the majority of whom are on the Oregon Health Plan. We also reach more than 30,000 people each year with age-appropriate inclusive sex ed. We're the state's top provider of STI testing and treatment and offer more breast, chest, and cervical cancer screenings than anyone else in Oregon. In rural communities, we're often the only option for miles. As proud safety net providers, we never turn patients away, regardless of insurance, immigration status, or ability to pay. When we say care no matter what, we mean it. But right now that care is under threat. President Trump's budget bill includes a provision that would defund Planned Parenthood by blocking Medicaid reimbursements to our health centers. We're grateful that Attorney General Rayfield and 22 other states are suing the federal government to stop it. While a preliminary injunction lets us continue receiving Medicaid reimbursements for now, the threat is real. If this provision stands, health centers will close. Abortion access will shrink. Over 80,000 Oregonians could lose trusted life-saving care. We're still providing our full scope of services, but patients are confused and afraid. Our staff are bracing for what's next. If defunding goes through, Oregon must be ready to fill the gap, because this fight isn't just about Planned Parenthood. It's about the single mom in Coos Bay with nowhere else for birth control, the transgender patient in Medford who has found a provider who respects them, and the college student in Ashland who needs care, not judgment. Thank you again to Attorney General Rayfield for defending our rights, and thank you all for standing with us. Now more than ever, we must show extremist politicians you might pick a fight with us, but you won't win. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cal Peterson. I'm a senior at Southern Oregon University, and I'm also the Speaker of the Senate for the Associated Students of Southern Oregon University this year. And thank you. And I'm here to speak about the crucial importance of federal student aid, specifically programs like the Pell Grant, TRIO, and Work Study. These aren't just financial tools, they're lifelines for many students at SOU. Our student body is incredibly diverse, and a significant percentage of our enrolled students are first-generation students. For these students, these programs are necessary to succeed in college. Pell Grants make a college education possible by bridging the gap between what a family can pay and the true cost of tuition. TRIO programs give students the academic support, mentorship, and guidance to navigate a system that is often new and confusing. Finally, Work Study allows students to both earn money and valuable experience without having to choose between a job and their studies. These programs are essential for many students to be able to succeed at Southern Oregon University, and I personally know students who are very uncertain about the future of their federal student aid and their ability to even attend college. And so these programs are critical to increasing access to college for all. Support for these is support for a stronger, more equitable Oregon. Thank you for your time.
So I'm Josh Ballack. I am the Vice President of Health Policy for All Care Health. We're a coordinated care organization serving Jackson, Josephine, Curry, and extreme southern Douglas County. And thank you so much for coming down, and Representative Senator, great to see you. I really wanted to kind of highlight this issue that has really popped up with HR 1, and I refer to it as HR 1 because it's important to remember that was a budget bill that they put a lot of policy into, and as a result, it is a really disjointed and dangerous piece of legislation because what they ended up doing was relatively minor changes at the beginning, which are impacting very important folks like the Planned Parenthood, the Cowan population, undocumented folks that need those services. But those are relatively small populations that we can figure out as a state how to fix. But as the years go along, we start getting into larger and larger sections and populations that are more negatively getting impacted. So the first group that's going to be impacted are folks having to get constant eligibility checks and having to re-up. So right now, most of us, we do it over maybe once a year. Folks will have to start doing it, some folks will have to start doing it every 6 months. And I don't know about you all, but that's annoying doing it once a year. Trying to do it every 6 months is nearly impossible. And they're also talking about adding work requirements onto folks to basically say, if you're not working hard enough, like, you know, living isn't working hard enough, that you aren't eligible for health care. Now, I think that will get pushed out in large part because CMS can't functionally make that work, but it doesn't matter, it's still sitting there. But the existential threat that is actually inside of HR 1, this budget bill, is a reduction in what's known as the hospital provider tax, the provider tax. Oregon leverages billions of dollars in order to fund the Oregon Health Plan, and that is the existential threat that is facing us. And if we don't work together to mitigate that or stop that, we are going to have a real problem in the future.
Thanks, Josh.
My name is Kathy Kazee, and I serve as a program coordinator at UNITE in Medford. UNITE has served for nearly 3 decades. We've supported the Latino immigrant and agricultural worker communities, providing essential services and advocacy to address their unique needs and challenges. We appreciate your ongoing efforts to protect immigrant rights in Oregon, including your involvement in over 10 legal actions against the Trump administration, notably concerning issues such as birthright citizenship. Your advocacy plays a vital role in defending vulnerable populations and promoting equitable policies. As you are likely aware, recent federal directives requiring the sharing of Medicaid eligibility information with ICE have significantly impacted our community. Many individuals have expressed fear of ICE enforcement, leading to a decline in healthcare enrollment and coverage. Consequently, some community members are opting to forego necessary medical services, which pose serious public health concerns. Furthermore, modifications of SNAP benefits threaten to exacerbate food insecurity among our community members. The mechanization of agriculture, particularly in the wine grape industry, has resulted in a reduction of available employment opportunities. Currently, our weekly food pantry serves about 50 families, many of whom report a lack of available work, further highlighting the economic challenges faced by local workers. Recent law enforcement actions targeting legal and illegal marijuana industries have resulted in ICE detentions of an estimated 25 to 30 individuals, underscoring ongoing issues related to law enforcement and community safety. These developments continue to influence the social and economic fabric of our community, necessitating ongoing dialogue and policy review to ensure the protection of well-being of immigrant populations. Our support of workers within the illegal marijuana sector, financed through the Criminal Justice Commission, continues to grow. The severity of associated crimes is increasing, encompassing such issues as trafficking, sexual assault, and unpaid wages. In the current economic climate, where employment opportunities are limited, it is crucial to safeguard vulnerable populations from exploitative employers. We advocate for revisions to OLCC authority, enabling to deny permits to entities involved in worker abuse and wage violations, thereby strengthening regulatory oversight and protecting workers' rights. And finally, to prosecute human traffickers in Oregon.
Thank you for that. Right on the money with the time. Before we get started, Kristen, let's call up Ali Rosenbluth, Renee Braga, and Paul Westelli. I'm sorry if I mispronounced some names.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity and for being here. My name's Kristen Roy. I'm the Chief Legal Officer in Government Relations of Asante. I've been at Asante for 8 years and in Ashland for 8 years. I'm a mom to an incoming kindergartner at Ashland School District and also involved in city government with the Citizens Budget Committee along with the Audit Committee. Just by way of brief background for Asante, Asante is the largest employer in Southern Oregon. It's also the largest healthcare provider. We serve nine different counties and 600,000 people in the community. I think, Rogue Regional Medical Center in Medford is the safety net hospital. We serve the most vulnerable populations and have the highest level of Medicaid enrollees. In serving, just services including neonates in our NICU, the inpatient behavioral health service, and other pediatric, including pediatric oncology. The anticipated federal cuts, as Josh mentioned, are really truly an attack on rural health care. And the proposed changes to Medicaid are going to have a devastating impact on access here. Hospitals in Oregon are barely making a margin. Half of them are losing money. I think the other thing that's really equally concerning too is it's not just federal, we've got to work with our state as well. Recently, Oregon Health Authority proposed a rule that went into effect, that they proposed to go into effect that would really impact 3 hospitals in Southern Oregon, and it was going to be about a $33 million impact. I will say, just like you're seeing in this room today, our community rallied. 200 letters were sent in over 2 days, and Oregon Health Authority paused the rule. So and thank you. I think the pressures at the federal and the state level will only grow stronger, and we would just ask that our state officials, like you're doing today, are just involving us in the conversation and the partnership, and Southern Oregon wants a seat at the table. So we just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I am speaking here on behalf of Coalition Fortaleza as a volunteer in their rapid response work. Coalition Fortaleza is a Latina-led organization that was founded in 2020 after the Alameda fire, one of the largest climate disasters in our region, disproportionately impacting Latinx, working class, and senior communities. Coalition Fortaleza was created to bring displaced communities back home and support the economic liberation of Latino, Latina, and Latinx communities. Like I said, Coalition Fortaleza is supporting a new rapid response network to prepare and provide for immigrant communities threatened by Trump's racist immigration policies and how they're impacting us here in the Rogue Valley. Last Wednesday, July 30th, verified eyewitnesses at the Medford ICE facility reported a geotransport bus with detainees from Southern Oregon who were sent to the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington. There is abundant evidence from impacted families, other eyewitnesses, that these detentions were connected to DEA, FBI, and Jackson County Sheriff raids on multiple cannabis farms, including OLCC farms. Reporting from 404 Media earlier this year also showed emails showing informal collaboration between the Medford Police Department and ICE that the ACLU of Oregon called concerning because of our Oregon sanctuary law, which is incredibly vital to our communities. However, the ICE detentions last week make it clear that there is a problematic gap that is being exploited to detain immigrants here in Southern Oregon. And so our questions for you, Attorney General, is how is the Attorney General's office protecting immigrant farm workers, particularly those on cannabis farms, from deportation? How will your office step in to protect and advocate for our community members who are now sitting wrongfully in the Northwest Detention Center? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. My name is Rene Braga. I'm with United Oregon. And today I want to speak clearly and boldly about a workforce that is not only essential, but irreplaceable. And I'm talking about the Oregon Latinos farm workers and forestry workers. Their contribution is not just vital, it's the backbone of our economy and public safety. Across Oregon, more than 90% of the farm labor is done by Latino workers. In Jackson County and the Rogue Valley, nearly every pear, grape, and vegetable harvested owes itself to their hands. These workers generate over $5 billion annually in direct agricultural production, and when you follow the value to the supply chain, processing, transport, retail, that number grows to a staggering $40 billion in total economic activity. In simple terms, nearly every $1 in $8 that moves through the Oregon's economy is tied directly to their labor, the Latino farm workers. Their work fills our grocery stores, feeds our children, and sustains entire rural communities. So next time you're discussing immigration and questioning their place here, while at the table with their friends and family, look at the food on your plate. That's the proof they belong. But it doesn't stop there. When wildfires drain our towns and forests, it's again the Latino workers, many on H-2B visas, who put their lives on the line. They make up 85% of Oregon's wildland firefighting and forestry crews. So roughly 8 or 9 out of 10 workers are Latino, specifically Mexican. They thin dangerous fuels, plant trees in the ash, and restore the land 12 months out of the year. In Jackson County alone, the total value of their wildfire and forest restoration works can exceed $400 million annually. They feel scared to run around the town and get targeted just for being brown. Now imagine what happens when ICE shows up. Imagine what happens when fear drives workers into the shadows or forces them to leave entirely. We are looking at the collapse of harvest, the crippling wildfire response, and massive economic losses across our farms, forests, and towns. Without these workers, millions of dollars will vanish from the Oregon's economy. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul, before you get going, can we have Phil Meyer, Terry Fairbanks, and Carmel Zaran come up, please? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Westell, Executive Director of Jefferson Public Radio. JPR has been located on the campus here at Southern Oregon University as part of the university's regional educational mission since 1969, when the station was first started as a student-run station. As probably everyone knows, in late July, Congress and the Trump administration enacted legislation that rescinded all previously approved federal funding for public radio and television stations around the country. This has created a huge financial challenge for stations like JPR, which serve mostly rural, small communities that take extra infrastructure to get our signals to those places. At JPR, it's resulted in an immediate $525,000 budget deficit that we're working very hard to solve. We're working hard to replace this lost funding, and our listeners and stakeholders have responded very, very generously, as they always do, many people in this room. Most folks, with the help of all our listeners, we've made up about half of our funding, lost federal funding, just since June. So we're well on our way to sustaining a viable new business model that helps support public radio here in Southern Oregon. I want to encourage Oregon State government to take all steps necessary and possible to ensure that citizens here in Southern Oregon have access to fact-based journalism that public media provides, as well as the cultural programming that improves the quality of our lives here, and the vital emergency alert services that protect the lives of all of our neighbors. I want to also ask for your help vigorously defending a free and independent press, which is so vital to a free and democratic society, and is increasingly under threat. It's increasingly under threat of lawsuits and non-evidence-based investigations by the FCC. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Phil Meyer. Professionally, I'm the CEO of Southern Oregon PBS. Paul and I have a lot of experience encapsulating our points into 2 minutes of speaking time. So for us, the rescission is $1 million a year, and it's 37% of our budget. So we would have to eliminate our staff completely, and we still wouldn't make that up. We'd have to double our revenue from donations to be able to make up and offset those federal cuts. What we are doing, we've made some cuts, some economization. We have 3 positions open that we're not filling. That's 20% of our staff. We serve 500,000 people covering 18,000 square miles. So licenses in Medford, Klamath Falls, and 10 translators all around Southern Oregon and Northern California. So on the personal side, my wife and I have 3 adult children. 2 work at universities, one of whom works in the area of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Jedi. Our 3rd child has autism and lives with us here in Medford. So I would add to the comments about Medicaid, the work requirements, the recalculation of benefits, those don't kick in until 2027 after the midterms. I would also add, when our son was diagnosed, The incidence of autism was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 36. So there's going to continue to be an influx of adults who need support, including our son. And then finally, my wife is my son's direct support. She's paid by Medicaid. So 5 people in our family, all affected different ways in federal cuts. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to speak to you after the event. Thank you.
Hello, can everyone hear me? My name is Carmel Zaran. I actually represent the city of Ashland as one of our city attorneys. The backdrop for this question pertains to, the background for this question pertains to the funding of city governments. As I'm sure you know, and certainly our representatives know, a lot of time in city budgets, they'll be like, the federal grants are almost so predictable that they're line items in municipal budgeting. But we've noticed that the federal grants are starting to include clauses that conflict with state laws on issues like diversity, inclusion, immigration, which may significantly affect schools, local governments, nonprofits. These entities are kind of in an ethical conundrum about accepting the grants without it also being in violation of certain state laws. I'm very grateful for the contribution that your office has already done in making those steps. And I've noted, and I've reviewed some of the injunction and some of the filings in that. Assuming the current administration continues these sorts of draconian efforts, to the extent you're able to, I was wondering if you would be willing to share some of your litigation strategy and also how other public institutions can support your effort. And thirdly, if your office has developed some sort of communication around it so that attorneys like myself can be quickly updated for the latest strategies so that we can in turn properly advise our client.
My name is Terry Fairbanks, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative. I work with multiple partners on landscape resilience and wildfire risk reduction. And I'm here today to highlight 3 recent federal actions that have really impacted the work that we do. The first is the reduction of $21 million of NRCS funding. This funding would have treated 10,000 acres in the Rogue Valley, near Rogue River and Gold Hill, and that mainly on private property, and would have really helped to reduce fire risk in those communities that don't have a lot of resources. The other critical funding is the operational disruptions. Because of the delay of Forest Service funding, we can't do understory reductions. We can't burn the piles that are sitting out in the woods. We have helicopters that basically got stopped mid-funding because there was no longer any funding there to pay for that work to be completed. And so there's huge piles on landings, which have actually increased the risk. So we haven't been able to fulfill some of that work. And then the last one is very dear to my heart. Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative has a wildfire risk reduction education program. We go into the high schools, we go into the K1 through 7, and we work with teachers and bring them education materials about wildfire. And it includes trauma-informed care and information that the teachers can use to help with their students. So our EPA grant got cut midway, $161,000. We had 3 educators who weren't able to finish the rest of that semester in going into those classrooms. So that's mainly what I wanted to share with you is those 3 examples. I work with Lombokotsi Restoration Project. I know a lot of people are familiar with them, and they're one of our partners, and they have suffered just as many disruptions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Schwar, and I'm not executive director of anything. But I'm an ordinary citizen. I've lived here in the Valley for more than 30 years. And I am an active member of Oregon District 2 Indivisible. And we've been on the streets. Actually, thousands of us have come out to Medford. People have been standing over the overpass, and we've been protesting the unconstitutional actions of President Trump. We want to thank you so much for being here, and I just want to ask, where the heck is Cliff Bunce? He's like our rep, and he hasn't he's refusing to hold town halls, and so we really appreciate the three of you here so we can petition our grievances to our government. The one question or statement I wanted to make is about the unconstitutional tariffs that Trump is imposing. As you've heard from so many other testimonials here tonight, we're really being hit economically hard here in Southern Oregon because our economy is based on agriculture and healthcare, and the big ugly bill is just tearing us apart with that. We're still recovering from the major fires that happened in 2020, but the tariffs are hitting us at the grocery stores already. And as you can see in this room, there's a lot of retirees who aren't getting those raises that you get when you're employed, and so the retirees are really feeling that when we go to the grocery store. And so action on that in the courts we really need, and we feel it's unconstitutional. Thank you for your time.
Hi folks, my name is Christopher Lucas. I'm a professor here at this university, and my colleague Sage DeVise actually stated our concerns very well, and I don't want to really repeat that. I think I would just add that, we spent the last week on this campus dealing with some really difficult financial news delivered by our president and by president of our university. That comes from both the federal level and the state level, and I would just love to see somehow more coordination at the state level around helping higher ed grapple with really statewide, really difficult higher ed challenges on the financial side. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Alison Laughlin, and I'm an immigrant. I came to America 50 years ago. I'm a citizen. First, I want to say thank you. What a wonderful opportunity. I had lots of things I was going to say, but I'm going to cut them short. And I just want to reinforce that comment about indivisible. OR2, the indivisible for this district, has come up with 6 goals for our political action. And I'm going to mention 2 of them. The first one is the federal government, where we impact that. The second one is state. Hang on, I'm getting there. The second one is state and local team, focusing on what guardrails are in place in Oregon as we face the MAGA administration and what legislative or politics we need to protect. It'll help hold state, county, and city officials and local boards accountable. And this is you, and we need help. There are thousands in Oregon ready to mobilize, and we need to know how to support you, what actions we should focus on, what protests, letters, testimonies, good trouble. Things keep changing daily. Some things go to court, some things just disappear. Please help us help you. We can't let our democracy die. We need to attack authoritarian rule and the pillars that support it with your help. Thank you. It's the Australian hour, apparently. I'm also an immigrant from Australia, and I had a couple of points that I wanted to make. The first one is that I wanted to decry the treatment of our immigrant community,
and the inhumane way that they're being treated, the mask wearing, the not showing proper ID, it feels illegal. You guys know what the law is. I don't know, but I want to know how I can protect my community members from that kind of overreach. The point that I come here personally, I'm a graduate student right now at Eastern Oregon University, no shade SOU, but I'm studying counseling, and right now across the counseling community there are shockwaves going through. There are some things that Oregon can't control in terms of funding, I understand that, but there are some things that you as legislators can take responsibility for, and that is the transparency that Care Oregon is not practicing with regards to reducing the availability of counsellors for people on OHP. Right now there are counsellors across the state of Oregon who are having to breach their ethical duties to clients and say, sorry, I can no longer serve you because Care Oregon has made me no longer contracted. So this is something you guys can do something about, and we really urge you to protect those most vulnerable members of our community. Thank you so much.
Okay, looking for Michael Velasquez, Virginia Conservative.
Excuse me, Alan Journey.
Great.
My name is Alan Journey. I am co-facilitator of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now. I am here to express my absolute disgust at the behavior of the Trump administration in rejecting science regarding climate change. We are in an absolute catastrophic situation such that potentially by the end of the century, all life on this planet as we know it is likely to be destroyed precisely because of the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. I would encourage you to do whatever you can to stand against the stupidity and insanity of this current administration. I'd also like to encourage you to consider supporting, all of you, and I know Senator Golden's a big fan of the effort to amend the Oregon Constitution to grant every Oregonian the right to a healthy environment. Most Oregonians probably think Oregonians already enjoy that right. Unfortunately, we don't. It stands against us as organizations such as Our Children's Trust file suit to help protect the environment for future generations. Please do all you can to support the right to a healthy environment. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I'm Kelly Marcatulli, and I'm here to talk about a topic not addressed by anybody yet, and I respect everybody here because this shows that Southern Oregon cares about our civil liberties, and my issue is a very unpopular one. I'm electrosensitive. As my shirt indicates, cell phones and Wi-Fi make me sick. But this is an issue that has been ignored by our legislators. And the big ugly bill that was just signed into law allows telecommunications corporations to put a cell tower now anywhere they want. And this affects many of you, and you will not be able to say, I do not want that cell tower near my home. 704 is a provision in the 1997 Telecommunications Act that says that based on environmental issues, you cannot push back against telecom. And there's a huge effort to push back against this 704 no more. Many states in the United States are working to push this agenda forward to stop 704 no more, which would mean that if you feel sick, if a cell tower goes outside your home, you can call the Attorney General, you can get a lawyer, and you can succeed in pushing back against that cell tower. And this is really important to me because I do feel sick. People don't understand this. I know I'm very unpopular right now because so many people are addicted to cell phones and you feel like you cannot live without them. But they're dumbing down our community, they're dumbing down our society. It's a brain drain for people to rely on cell phones as they do. So thank you for listening, and thank you again to everybody here. This brings joy to my heart to see so many people engaged in our politics. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. Virginia Camberos, my pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I am the Regional Director for Unite Oregon, and I'm also a city councilwoman from the city of Phoenix, and thank you. So I'm here to represent, all of our Latino community here in the Rogue Valley. We hear stories, we talk to, many of our community members about, how they're feeling. And I think that there's just so much trauma inflicted in our community. Me as a brown person, I'm even traumatized, just going out into the community and, feeling that I'm being watched or anything like that and being racially profiled. So this has been very, very, I guess, heartbreaking, we can say that the question is from our community that we've had conversations with is that, how is our Attorney General, how is, the folks that are here, to protect our community, how are we going to act, even though it's a federal issue, immigration, we understand that, but we are a sanctuary state. How are we going to live to that? I mean, we know that in California, there were sanctuary states, it's a sanctuary state cities, but it was it was still enforced. ICE was still enforcing their ability to go in there and pretty much kidnap, our folks. So this is one of the things that I would really stress to you is that, have these conversations with community-led organizations that are, Latino-led, and I think that would be very important for you to hear our voices. It's been very difficult to see how our community is not going to the stores. I mean, I just went to Winco the other day, and honestly, I was the only brown person in that space. I'm like, how is that possible? Someone else, went to Food for Less, another colleague of mine, and it's like, texted me, I'm the only brown person in this space. How is that? So there's tons and tons of fear in our community, and we thank you, for being, there and supporting us, I'm sure. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for y'all's time. It's great to be here. My name is Joshua Palmer. My Irish name is Yosua, and I'm a licensed massage therapist here at 10 Lane as well. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I just wanted to quickly name some resources for disrupting ICE activities, just brief. There's a really great Reddit thread I came across. That speaks to how we can use nonviolent interposition. If we see our neighbors being detained by those thugs, we hold hands and we perform a nonviolent barrier. And we use nonviolence, we use distracting techniques, we ask for their names, we ask for their badges. We do anything we can to distract them so our neighbors can be safe and get to safety. We can bang pots, we can use lawnmowers, just get creative. We have a lot of things in our legal right to distract those mofos and protect our communities. My mom and I were up, thank you. My mom and I were in Best Buy last Wednesday when that bus full of the detainees went up north. And we arrived just late, but we were really, really sad that we weren't there to help. And so I'm just trying to learn how to help and here to learn. And I'm grateful to see a lot of people helping. And the last thing I want to say is I don't want to take up too much space is that someone with Irish roots, I know it's like to have my people be colonized and forced starvation. And what's happening in Gaza must stop. We need to divest from Israel.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Ben Baruch, and I want to address two issues. The first one affects me very personally. My safety is endangered because of the weaponization of the definition of anti-Semitism. This is an issue that the legislature and the Attorney General can address very simply by making it clear in law and in public policy that the criticism of the actions or policies of any government or state is exactly the kind of speech that is protected by the First Amendment. The second issue I want to address is our budget. And we keep hearing that we don't have enough money in our budget. I suggest that we do have enough money available to us, we just have to go get it. The big ugly bill and our system social system, our capitalist system, has been generating lots and lots of money for lots and lots of people. That's where the money is. We can get that money by having a progressive income tax and or a progressive property tax. The money is there. Coming over here, I heard on NPR, which is also endangered, that the tariffs that are being introduced are not really affecting 20% of the population with the most money because they can afford them. It's just the rest of us that are being affected. The same thing holds for taxes. Their taxes can go up and they won't really feel it. They'll bitch a lot, but they can afford it, and we need to go get it so that we don't have to cut essential services for the rest of the population.
We have several questions that have already been submitted in advance and many more. We're going to kind of group these together into similar topics. I'm going to read the questions and leave it to our esteemed panel of elected officials to answer. First, I think we're going to start with an ICE and immigration question. This is from someone named Santi. They asked, I should say, what is being done at the state level, the AG office, to combat the Trump administration's actions against immigrants? We are seeing due process rights being rejected and bond hearing being eliminated. I thrive here in Oregon as a college graduate dreamer, but I fear that my future here is in this country may be taken away from me by force.
Maybe we can start right there. And there's a handful of questions that were asked, and I've kind of written a few of them down. ICE questions on immigration, there was a whole host of those that kind of came up. So I'm going to take a little bit of a broader approach so that we can kind of see the full spectrum, and hopefully we'll answer a couple of the questions that you all have at the same time. First thing, what I would do is take us back prior to the Trump's inauguration. One of the things we realized, and this was actually mentioned, was how do we get outreach as a government into community? So we formulated, in the Department of Justice, we created a Federal Oversight and Accountability Task Force. Part of the reason we did that, if you think about it, right, a lot of state agencies know how to get a hold of us. They know how to connect with us. We also know that if we were trying to communicate out into the world, right, and we were only doing it via Twitter or whatever the preferred social media or press releases, only my mother would find that. And so what we really wanted to do was get into community and access other networks so we can better communicate for two reasons. One, we need to learn more what's going on the ground. Okay? The other thing is, as we have information, and sometimes there's misinformation, we need to better be able to communicate into this state and across this state. And so that's what we did. And so we have a group right now that is formulated of community groups across the state that have broad outreach, and we regularly meet to talk about impacts and how we can better address those. So that was the preventative side of things as we started off. The other preventative thing that we knew that was going to happen is that we have had sanctuary state laws in this state for an incredibly long time. They peacefully coexisted with numerous presidents of different political ideology for decades. We also know that law enforcement is trained on these laws. And so what we wanted to do before really things started to come to head is that we were going to provide some commonality of understanding in this process. So our office worked with law enforcement, brought folks together to kind of talk about what are our responsibilities as a sanctuary state. Again, remember, law enforcement is actually in Oregon is trained on these things. And so we worked ahead of time. We also provided sanctuary state toolkit. And that is something you can find on our Federal Oversight and Accountability webpage at the Oregon Department of Justice. Again, different ways to outreach, to provide resources, not only to just us in this room, right, but to law enforcement, to community members, other folks that can access that. So this was on the front end, the preventative side, before anything ever occurred. At the same we were forecasting the issues that may come up, the unconstitutional actions that may come up. And so we started preparing in a legal context. Now, the one thing to remember about the state is there's certain lawsuits that we are the right party to engage, and there's certain lawsuits where we are not the right party. So, for instance, when one of our personal, say, our constitutional rights as an individual are being impacted, you have a claim as an individual. We, as the state, don't necessarily have a claim to enforce your personal constitutional rights. So you have to think about the different roles that we all have in our current legal landscape. And so I'm going to talk about two different lanes. Some of those things, birthright citizenship, right? That was something we filed the very next day, within 24 hours of that executive order coming out. The other thing, what I want to think about is right now, ICE has been acting in Southern California in a way that we have a judge in Southern California that has ruled that there are actions that are going on in terms of profiling, the way that they are arresting folks based upon the color of their skin. And obviously, these are in violation of the United States Constitution. Now, this is being done in California based upon facts that are in California. Oregon is not the right state to intervene in that type of place, but we did provide, and this is where we can provide help, in the amicus brief setting, where we did that in Southern California as a state. Currently in Oregon, we have different groups, the ACLU and others, ACLU is also on our panel, we're looking into what are the current set of facts and circumstances here in the state of Oregon as things are moving forward. So know that that's going on. We have about 10 lawsuits filed in this similar vein where the state is a party to that, where we're trying to really work and enforce, as well as partner with community groups in this space. So that's kind of a broad perspective of some of the things that we're engaging on in this space. So I just want to, and there's more that we can continue to go, we just want to be mindful of the time. A couple of other things very quickly. Some folks asked about terms and conditions lawsuits about the city, and I think it was being the attorney for, and I forget, it was the city of Ashland. And so this is something that's coming up right now, is a lot of the what I will tell you is a lot of the different agencies federally are providing new terms and conditions to accept different grants. And some of those conditions are in violation of our state laws, so specifically sanctuary state laws. Now, the other thing to note is we've had lawsuits in the past in federal court where federal courts have upheld our sanctuary status. This isn't new. In the first Trump administration, they tried to restrict federal funding because of our sanctuary status, and the federal judge says, no, you don't get to do that. These are actually valid and can peacefully coexist together. And so our belief in the terms and conditions lawsuit, as we've been approaching them, we're watching those terms and conditions come in, we're monitoring and providing advice to our agencies. Some of them we do believe don't violate state law, and it's go ahead and sign them. You'd think as a federal government they'd have like the same consistent form. They don't. And so we have to look at each and every one of them. Some of them, obviously, and you know this, we already have lawsuits in filed, like say the Department of Transportation, where we're looking at those terms and conditions. So we absolutely, as a state, cannot sign that because it would be a violation of state law, which then presents budget challenges should that not move forward. The other thing to note right now, VOCA funding, Victims of Crime Act. We're going to have a 75% reduction in the state of Oregon for Victims of Crime Act money because we are unable to sign a terms of condition. And so that is going to be something we're working on right now in a litigation sense where we're going to have to fight in that space. So just know we're working to better partner. If there are other tools, we've been working with some cities where we might be able to put some additional toolkits to assist cities and counties. The problem is obviously there's a state law that we can't advise anyone other than the state in terms of legal, but we can talk about best practices. So that was the answer in there. Tariffs, I think someone mentioned this as well. Tariffs are a perfect example of a regressive tax. Tariffs can be useful at times, right? Congress has put in sideboards, but it's the sideboards that Congress put in, which every president has followed, really are meant for economic safeguards, meant to protect our small business and ultimately protect all of us as consumers. So we have a lawsuit right now that's filed on tariffs. This is a lawsuit that's Oregon's leading on. And so we were last week in Washington, D.C. in the appeals court. We've already won in a 3-panel judge in New York in the International Court of Trade. We were back in Washington, D.C. last week in front of an en banc panel. That means all of the judges, 11 of them, to hear oral arguments on that case, and we expect a ruling hopefully in the next couple of months on how that is going to progress. Again, this is a part of this agenda, how we're really seeing a divide in the haves and have-nots, where on one side we are pulling away the social safety net, and then on the other side we're implementing a tax structure, whether it's via tariffs or whether HJR 1, which is really frankly widening the wealth inequality that we have in our society that pre-existed even the Trump administration.
Bullshit! There was a raid here! I saw them load the bus! Bring our neighbors back!
Okay, and I don't, we must have been miscommunicating. That's not what I was talking about, the tariffs in a different situation. The next question, I think just really quickly, was how can we support the current movement right now that we're experiencing? The one thing that I really believe, and I grew up in a family where my dad was a Republican, and he was senior vice president of a commercial insurance company. He was in the Air Force Reserves, and we grew up up in a space where my mother, on the other hand, was a Green Party member. She still is a Green Party member. And the joke that I always say is when I was going through my primary is that neither of those voted for me in the election because they couldn't. And here's the one thing that you realize to parents. My mother would protest and get arrested at the Nevada nuclear test sites because she believed having less nuclear weapons is what makes our communities safe. My dad would tell me how we need to have nuclear weapons to make communities safe, and these are two people you deeply love. We can be here together in this space. These are two people who want the same thing. I love them dearly. They're going about it in different ways. We as a society have to be able to find a way to respect each other even in the most challenging circumstances that we are in today, to be able to have these productive conversations. And I can't give enough credit to the woman that stood up and was talking about cell phones in an environment where she knew that maybe what she was talking about wasn't going to be terribly popular. It wouldn't be popular with my 14-year-old son, I'll tell you that much. And I will most certainly go tell him about that tonight when I drive home. But I think this is what we need to foster. We need to foster our personal relationships, our communication, and the one thing that cannot happen is we have to maintain the level of energy. Here's the thing, the most energy always comes after you lose an election. Right? When we win an election, right, and we talk about the vision we want for the state, we start to become quiet and we get complacent. We as community members have to talk about what we want our community to look like, what we want our country to look like, not what we don't want it to look like all the time. And I think that is we fall back on that a little bit too much. And so I apologize. I wanted to get to those 4 questions. I apologize. I took up more time than I needed.
Actually, if we can ask one more question on this, I think there's a fair amount that I'm going to try to put together around some questions regarding how local law enforcement does or does not work with ICE and what those boundaries are and what you all are seeing.
So when you are thinking about ICE operating within the community, there are a set of federal laws that they're operating under. So you think about your local law enforcement operating under state laws. The federal ICE still has to follow the United States Constitution in that space. And so when there is a situation or facts are being articulated where they are not following the Constitution, or frankly you see something that might be in violation of the sanctuary status law, and this is a part that I actually missed, we have a sanctuary status hotline that you can call the Department of Justice, and we take those complaints in and we will contact local law enforcement to conduct investigations. That is what the legislature has given the responsibility to the Department of Justice to do. No, and I'm not, I agree with you on that statement. At the same time, this is, as things go on, this is the response that we have right now to be able to get information to then be able to react. The Department of Justice, no, you may not. No, you may not. Right now in Congress, so again, what I kind of focus on the different levels. We all have different tools at our disposal. So for instance, the legislature, when we were in the legislature, we actually passed a law that required identity of officers here in the state of Oregon. That law does not apply to federal officers. So right now what you have is the federal delegation working in federal government, in the Congress, working on adapting a law that was frankly, I think kind of similar to what we have here in Oregon. And they are working on that. So Senator Ron Wyden and Senator Merkley are working in that space. So again, we all have different tools in the different offices that we have. One of those tools is the reporting mechanism that we have. One of the other tools that we have in community, and back to the question of what do you do when someone's rights have been impacted. In the legal court of law, if your constitutional rights were being impacted and the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit on your behalf, we wouldn't have standing in court and a judge would kick us out of that courtroom, which is why in Southern California, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, when rights are being impacted, you have organizations like ACLU, other community organizations that are filing those lawsuits. So, and that was the one that was successful in Southern California. Now, while we are not the right party, what we do file is an amicus brief supporting what is going on under those circumstances. So the tough part about these different roles and responsibilities is knowing what lane each of us operate, and then frankly using all of the tools that we have available to us to advocate under those circumstances.
Okay. We'll move this actually to a different topic. I know there's been some comments around this assault on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. Very compelling testimony from the community about being the only brown person in a space, which resonates with me, but also I know some of you are working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space and wondering what that means. Now, this question comes from Robin, and they say, as a trans woman, I would like to know your stance on recent administrative threats to trans healthcare.
And so Oregon was one of the first states with Washington and Minnesota that filed a lawsuit incredibly early in the administration to protect gender-affirming care. And you most saw recently that all the other states, and again, this is the thing to be proud about, to be a part of Oregon. You have an amazing Department of Justice. You have amazing people that are working on behalf of everyone here in this room, and frankly, everyone across this state. And so we were one of the first states to fight back in this category that is pending in the Washington court. There are probably a couple of other avenues that may come up legally in the future that we will be active in. What I will tell you is some of the other states have now joined and filed their own companion case back east. And so you're seeing that fight take place. You're also seeing a different battle go on in Congress about how that is going to shake out in terms of how their funding models and how they're going to continue to operate moving forward, which is an entirely separate lane of work that we don't necessarily have an impact in.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about voting rights. There's a question about what you, Attorney General Rayfield, are doing to protect the voting rights and election security here in Oregon. And I think there's a kind of a follow-up question around all this work related to gerrymandering, and then what we are seeing coming out of Texas and the response for some states, and if you have any thoughts on that.
And I know this is actually a wonderful question for all of us on this, and I know Senator Golden and Representative Marsh have been active in the campaign finance space as well as the anti-gerrymandering space. I think it bothers me as a democracy when we see people willing to cheat and change the boundaries to get a political advantage in our system. And to me, that is so, when it's so blatant in our country, and so frankly, willfully discussed in our country. There's a lot of rough things and painful things going on in our country right now. This one thing strikes at the core hallmark of our democracy, which is free and fair elections. And this is manipulating it's manipulating the voices, all of our voices, the strength of our voices in Congress. And it's incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly bothersome to even then watch other states feel the need to respond, that you're gerrymandering, so now we're going to gerrymander. Both of them are wrong, right? But as human beings, I understand the reaction. But both of them are wrong. I think there are systemic reforms that have to happen in our democracy to get away from gerrymandering. It is a real problem. Money in politics is a problem. There are structural reforms that we absolutely have to strengthen our democracy in this space. And unfortunately, in the Department of Justice, I have a very different set of tools, and I want to pass it off to the legislators because they have incredibly powerful tools at their disposal for the state of Oregon. But in the Department of Justice, we talk about free and fair elections. We as Democratic Attorneys General are communicating on a weekly basis. We were communicating before Trump took office, and we have a group of attorneys general that are focused on making sure that we have free and fair elections and are meeting and preparing in the event that things go on. And so just know and be heartened that there are people looking out on behalf of not just Oregon, but this entire country in this space, and that share that value and won't stop at anything and to make sure that that is the path moving forward. So I will pass this off because I really do think this is an incredibly important topic. And I don't know, Senator Representative.
The current battle centered in Texas over redistricting is, whoops, is this better? Yeah, thank you. Current battle in Texas centering around redistricting is horrifying to the future of this country. I have been a strong advocate of an independent redistricting commission. I thought it's sort of blatant. It sort of should be obvious that political candidates who stand to benefit or lose, depending on the outcome of a map, shouldn't be making the map. And more states this is not complicated. More and more states have gone in that direction, including California. Then you have a state like Texas, who at the behest of the president is just saying, let's steal 5 more seats. Well, let's not wait for the census. They're not really saying anything else than what's true about that. And you've got New York and Illinois, very blue states, saying we may retaliate. And I am both thinking that in order to have the kind of Republican democracy that we want, representative democracy that we want, we have to build trust that we are not feathering our own nests or guaranteeing our own political future by making our own maps, on the one hand. And on the other hand, resonating the idea that Democrats have to stop bringing pillows to knife fights. So I'm still, I hate to see us get dragged into that, kind of very cynical approach to how you draw political maps, but I'm still processing on that one. As far as, we can really be proud of our electoral system in Oregon, with the, I think, one exception of the inability of people to vote for candidates in primaries if they don't belong to one of the 2 major parties. And there are viable options and proposals to do something about that, and I think we should. It's time, we're still, that's a 1950s mentality, and we have to do something about it. But we can be very proud of the integrity of our elections. Our vote by mail, which I originally opposed because I missed my first political memories going with my mom at about 5 or 6 years old, as she voted to our local elementary school, and I was kind of awed by the process and the nice older people at the tables, and it seemed like a really important ritual of democracy that we should step up and embrace. And vote by mail, and now self-stamped, the state paying your postage for vote by mail has me going, really? Do we really have to do that? But more important is that access to voting be really open and free, and there are obviously any number of attempts to change that, to restrict voting rights. So every study, every investigation of our voting system has shown a almost unbelievable absence of fraud. The last time, and there's been a lot of investigation, I'm not going to remember the right number, but in the 25 years or so we've had vote by mail, there's something like 13 documented cases of fraud. You can't find a system that does better than that. So we have to withstand, we have to push back and say no to all the evidence, all the bushels of stolen ballots that we heard about from the president around different elections, even the ones that he won, and really stand by the evidence that we have a remarkably rigorous statement. And I just want a big shout out to our county election officials who at great personal danger, increasing personal danger, are doing the job of protecting our democracy. So I could go on, but once I figure out what to do about how to draw maps, I'll let you know.
And so we're talking about the classifying the different lawsuits that we're engaged in, and of those 35, a big chunk of those are federal funding lawsuits. And a lot of them are exactly what you talked about, that Congress has appropriated money for a specific purpose, and now the executive branch is pulling things back. And this is something that has happened in the history of our country before under Nixon, and then Congress came back and said, hey, no, we're going to go this very different direction. So it's really established law in this space, and so we've been winning a lot of these lawsuits that have been filed, and so you say to yourself, well, boy, how many lawsuits do we have filed? And the amount of money that is currently being protected is more than $3.3 billion. This is dollars that otherwise would flow into the state of Oregon, but for the actions of an executive branch. Remember, part of the thing is I served in the legislature. I served as a budget co-chair. One of the things that you're grappling with is you're trying to make difficult decisions, right, as you're trying to spend state dollars. You know what is incredibly important? Public input. And that's why the executive can't be doing this, right? Congress had public input to pass the law in the first place and said, hey, we want a Department of Education. Right? We want these essential services. You don't just get to pull back and do that. And so that's why if you look at the 35 lawsuits, about 18 of them we have preliminary injunctions where we have won, which is basically an order from the court that says, hey, you need to stop, Mr. President, And that's a really high burden to prove, right? And I talk about this a lot. You have to prove to a judge, these are judges appointed by Republicans, judges appointed by Democrats, about the likelihood of success on the merits, that you are likely to win. And then you have to prove irreparable harm, really high thresholds. And so we're winning those cases. There's 8 others that are currently pending as the courts are moving through the system. So that is what's going on right now. Again, you are going to see this shift, right, as Congress starts to go through their budgeting process. Then these lawsuits will start to go by the wayside, right? And now as we're looking at the current bill that was recently passed, we're looking at that bill to make sure that that was done constitutionally. One of the things that can happen is Congress can actually pass unconstitutional laws, and the Constitution of the land still gets to follow. So we as the Department of Justice, in partnership with all of the other attorneys general, are evaluating these laws to make sure they're constitutional. So when Congress passes a law that specifically and almost solely targets Planned Parenthood to defund them, right, of their Medicaid funding, where, and you heard earlier tonight, a big chunk of who they care for are folks on the Medicaid population, and they're doing that because of their advocacy. It's a violation of free speech. It's targeting. That's un-American. And so that's why you're able to have a lawsuit like that, and I'm just kind of drawing that distinction of things that have been passed previously versus things that are more prospective, and the different challenges that we have in those departments. Obviously, it's much more challenging to challenge an act of Congress moving forward, right, than when they made their intent clear with a prior law.
All right, real quick, I just really have to ask, because this was kind of skipped over. Like, there was 20 to 30 people kidnapped in a raid last week, and they were sent to a detention center in Tacoma. And I feel like that hasn't really been addressed much, and y'all haven't really talked about the fact that people were kidnapped in our community. We don't know who all they were. And what are you going to do to actually address that and to figure out what to do next? You talked about people being kidnapped by ICE and raids in Southern California, but it just happened here in Jackson County last week.
So let me, for those that didn't hear, as a question about the 20 to 30 people that were, the term used was kidnapped and are probably in detention in Tacoma, and we are wondering what's going to happen next and what the AG's office is going to do.
And so what I would do is go back a little bit and talk about, and this was brought up a little bit earlier, where you said everything you're talking about tonight, Dan, is very reactive. And that's absolutely 100% true. That's the space that we're in right now, and it makes this job incredibly difficult. When we see things in community, the Department of Justice is not a law enforcement for law enforcement. That is not the way that the legislature has created the Department of Justice. We have certain roles and responsibilities. We are not in community to be able to see some of these. So when we hear about incidents that went on here recently, where we're talking about the busload of folks that are now in Tacoma, those are things that we're hearing in a reactive space. And so we're not there in the moment. We're not like law enforcement where you think about your police agency that's on the ground. And so when we hear about things like that, as those get reported to us, we have an obligation that the legislature has given to us to then look into to see if there are sanctuary state violations. And that is our lane that is currently mandated to us by the legislature to look forward. And that's something that goes on currently, will go on, whether it's this instance or other incidents. And so that was kind of the process I was talking a little bit about earlier in a broader context. And so in this space, as people's rights are being violated constitutionally, there are certain times, and as I was mentioning that California lawsuit, and I'm going to go back to that because it's really important, if I were to randomly file a lawsuit under certain circumstances, the way that the courts have always been set up in the history of our country is that we have to, as a state, have standing, and judges will kick us out. And so what we have is this partnership with other organizations where we can come in and advocate, and we absolutely are advocating when rights are being violated. We have to stay on our lane, and often that is being done in an amicus brief setting in a law, what I would say in a court of law. Outside of the court of law is kind of what we talked about, which is the investigation into whether our sanctuary state laws are being followed or are not being followed. And so that is the lane that we have legally that has been mandated to us, and that is our scope of authority.
And is that investigation currently happening for what happened last week?
So, and again, as we talk about investigations that are going on into these spaces, those aren't things we're able to comment on.
Okay.
So fuck us then.
So we were going to go into closing statements. I think we'll start with Representative Marsh. We can.
Well, first of all, I'll go back to the thanks, and that is thanks to all of you for showing up, and to those of you who spoke and told with such passion and wonderful descriptions of your experiences and the things that you are worried about and the things that you've observed. I think what we are, I was reflecting back. I was first elected in 2016, which was, of course, turned out to be the first Trump administration. And when I joined the legislature, a lot of the work that we had to do was defensive work. We had to shore up our sanctuary state laws. We had to shore up reproductive rights. We had to look at our ability to set environmental law. And that was a theme for 4 years, is what can the state do to protect people, to guard the rights of Oregonians against federal intrusion. For 4 years following, we had the ability under a different administration to actually do the work that Oregonians need, and I can't tell you what a relief it was to not have to play defense, but to actually set off and address the issues like housing and homelessness and wildfire recovery and climate change. And we did that work with gusto and in a robust way. And now, sadly, we are back to a period in which we are playing defense again, but not only defense, we are playing it against a much more insidious and much more well-prepared administration. And what we are seeing is basically, I was taking notes on what everybody said today. We are seeing attacks on the safety net, represented by undermining the Medicaid system, which our most vulnerable populations depend upon, on cuts that are anticipated to SNAP, which is the food stamp program. We won't see those on the ground for a while, but you can absolutely guarantee that they are going to be disruptive to the food system in the Rogue Valley. We are seeing attacks on Planned Parenthood that was spoken to tonight. Not spoken to, but something that's really on my radar is Head Start. Head Start, since the 60s, right, has provided wonderful child development experiences for kiddos and their families. We know how important those services are. We know that by the time you get to kindergarten, most of that brain development has already happened, so we better get to children quickly and provide them with the support and the learning experiences that they need. And yet the current administration has said that, and this has stayed till I think September 6th, has said that a child won't be able to enroll in Head Start if the family is undocumented. So now, not only are we going to be ripping away a childhood experience for families, we are going to be ripping away all of the support systems that come with Head Start, all of the food programs that a family gets because they are part of Head Start. So that's just an example. There is absolutely a war on our social safety net system. There is clearly an attack ongoing on our undocumented neighbors. We are seeing that in the form of attacks on things like birthright citizenship, which surely will not be upheld over time, but we're seeing it in increased ICE deportation, spoken to frequently here tonight. We're seeing it just in the retraction of basic survival support systems. Our Medicaid system is essentially not going to be able to support services for undocumented individuals. Our federally funded clinics, and again, there's a temporary stay, but they've been told they can't provide services to undocumented citizens, and yet our healthcare clinics don't even ask for that kind of information because that's not in their mission. Their mission is to serve vulnerable people who need help. If you look at what the feds are doing, basically they do not want anyone who is not documented to get health care. And yet those people are going to show up at Asante and in emergency rooms when the illness or the injury is most progressed. So a complete attack on undocumented citizens, an attack on climate change, that was spoken to.
Besides us marching on the streets, are you offering any solutions?
Let me get to that.
Yeah.
And we're seeing attacks on the trans community. So those are just the attacks I heard mentioned here tonight. What we are doing is really twofold. You have an attorney general who is using all the tools of that office
to go to court. Many of these that were executive orders are not issues that we have the ability to touch at the legislative, in the legislative arena, but they are very much in the domain of the courts, and we should feel very grateful. We have an attorney general who's joining with other attorney generals across the country to really put robust efforts forward in the courts, many of which have been supported to this point. And on the legislative side, we are addressing everything that we can in that defensive mode. To be clear, we are not going to be able to cover all the cuts that are being proposed by the federal government. We are not going to be able to fill all the gaps to our Medicaid system. But what we are going to do is look at the outcomes that we are trying to get from our healthcare system and to think differently about how we get to those outcomes. It may not be through the official Medicaid system. It may be through a system of really supporting, for example, our school-based healthcare centers, giving block grants to the clinics that are on the ground, getting mobile units out there to provide services directly that don't require people to have to provide identifying factors that they are not going to want to provide. So we are doing everything we can in the legislature, and we can certainly talk offline about what some of those policy efforts are, but we're trying to be strategic, and we're trying to figure out how we can respond and how we can use the dollars that we do have in the most efficient way to be able to push back.
Thank you.
I want to use my couple minutes to challenge you tonight, because if you found tonight a downer, you're not alone. This has not been a delightful evening, because you, all of us, are deeply concerned with what's happening to our country, what's happening to our neighbors, what's happening to our climate, and how we seem to be sprinting on the federal level in the wrong direction. And all we're doing, Rep. Marsh called it defense, I would call it triage. We are trying to address the worst symptoms, and it's whack-a-mole that's just popping up all over the place. That's not going to get us where we need to go. The only path that I can see that restores sanity and some possibility for a viable future for this country is for all of us to redouble our activism, both in terms of showing up in the streets. We are seeing the beginnings of a series of events where millions of Americans are turning out into the streets. Historically, that has made a difference, and it can this time. The other thing, more directly, this sounds more boring, maybe it is boring, you've probably heard it your whole life. We have to get more active as voters and activists for political candidates. We need new policymakers and lawmakers at every level. Actually, I think many of our city governments are doing a very good job coping with the problems they have. But at the state and federal level, we need a Congress that will not abdicate all of its responsibility to the executive branch and ignore the Constitution. We need a Congress that won't shred the safety net, won't persecute and stigmatize immigrants, and recognizes the science of climate change and tries to change the trajectory. We badly, badly need that, and we can get it. You know, how many friends do you have that have been so discouraged? It's so easy to be discouraged now. We had this guy for 4 years and we put him back in office. Who wouldn't be discouraged by that? It's time. You don't have to do this as an individual. We are rich in this community with effective organizations, from Indivisible to Imitate to Unite Oregon. They're already doing the work, to Rogue Action Center. But we have to have a Congress that will do its job and will legislate for the next generation, the one after that. And we have to have a legislature, state legislature, that will do its job. Yes, Democrats are in charge. We need supermajority votes to make our tax system more progressive. I agree with the speaker who said the money is there, but it's in the pockets of those who have profiteered in some cases and profited in others from the last 20 years of adverse circumstances. When we say that in Salem, what we hear is Oregon's becoming an increasingly, why does Oregon hate business? Why are you trying to drive business and business people out of the state? So we need another 3 or 4 senators or 6 or 8 House members who reject that and understand the responsibility of supporting government, especially from those who've been the most fortunate. We just don't have that now. Many of these races are very close. Political activism, there's a really robust Democratic Party in this county. Political activism means knocking on a lot of doors before campaigns. It means engaging your friends who are less connected to what's going on. I know we've lost some elections and it's not fun to lose and people drift away from activism. It's the only path. I truly believe the answer, not the bandages and the triage, but the answer and the reversal of this trajectory is in your hands and mine, all of ours. Thank you for coming tonight.
Well, finally, I just want to say thank you all for being here tonight. I know these conversations are difficult. I know the fear in community is absolutely real. And I think the challenges are going to continue to be difficult over the next couple of years. But I am very grateful that we're all in this together. The one thing that I would say as we're moving forward in these spaces, the level of coordination and partnership about how we're moving forward in this moment is better than it has ever been among the Democratic Attorneys General. We meet weekly, multiple times a week, to talk about emerging issues as Attorneys General, as well as our staff are meeting weekly to talk about these issues and how we can better react in community to address all of these things. And what I can tell you with absolute certainty, we are using every single tool at our disposal to be able to effectuate the change that we want to see in our world. And what is going on right now, whether it is unlawful detentions, whether it is cutting the safety net programs or implementing regressive taxes, we are using everything we can to stop these actions. And I know tonight especially there's some really difficult problems and it feels very personal in this room. I feel that coming from you all to me tonight. What I want you to know is that we are in this together. Everybody in this room has the same values and vision for what the state and what the United States should be, and we're in this together, and we have to stick together. We are in this together, and we are stronger together as we work towards that. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. I respect you. Thank you. And I will be coming back. I really appreciate the time. This is an amazing community, and I feel very fortunate to share it with all of you.
Thank you all for coming. Please get home safely.
Which the brain translates into what we call solid. A new dimension in sound. This is Love by